1. I worked as a care staff for a private company of about 250-ish employees that deals with special needs individuals, mental disabilities, and often physical ones. We have day-hab facilities and group homes. In a prior job, I did the same for the state, but was moved to an IT role after a while, until the stupid from upper management became too great. Whole other story. Before any of that, I was an EMT, and before that I was in the army, and know how to cover my own butt. Backstory complete. My boss sent out an email to all staff and had an in-person company meeting because I put on a form the state inspectors look at that said, "Client returned from day trip sunburned, disoriented, and dehydrated. Staff with the client reported they passed out, apparent heat exhaustion. Reported to RN and state authority for possible neglect." Apparently, the RN never looked at the report before the state auditors came in a week later, although she did look at the client and agreed with me about the heat exhaustion the next day when she was back in the office from a day off. Fast forward 9 days, we have an emergency company meeting. Boss hands out a paper specifically telling every staff they are not to do anything outside the scope of their job description, and they are not doctors while staring at me the whole time. She calls me out specifically during the meeting by name. Alright, fine. I stopped doing anything but the exact wording of my original hiring duties. 2 months pass. One day, I get a call about a problem with the computers at the main office in San Antonio. My job is over an hour away. I had traditionally done all of the IT troubleshooting, but I was one of the first hires of the company and I had a background for it. Boss calls me on my day off and asks me to drive to the main office and fix her computer system. I said to her, "I cannot do anything outside of my listed duties per your order." Then I hang up and turn off the phone until dinner. After I turned the phone back on, I get a call within 10 minutes from the company owner. He, who had been nothing but nice to me up until now, just bluntly asks when I felt like doing my job and getting things working. But especially payroll. Don't I want to get paid tomorrow? Get your butt in gear, son. That may indeed have been the wrong way to start the conversation with someone who wasn't being paid extra for their IT problems. I referred him to the email and in-person letter boss had put out. Then I pointed out how company policy had a no firearms rule, but he specifically always carried 1911 to all company meetings and events on his right hip, calling it out by model as a Kimber 4. I then politely advised him to find a way to deal with his own problems, as the computers being bricked wasn't one of mine. But paying employees such as me was one of his, per state and federal law, and hung up. Turned off my phone again until I was at work 2 days later. In that time, apparently 3 staff had quit from failing to be paid. 18 more were threatening to, and the owner had driven over to have a chat with boss and myself. They laid out that as a senior care staff, my job role had expanded over the years I was there, 5 at that point, and I countered that the pay hadn't at all since I had been hired. My doing IT work was a charity from me, not a job requirement, and I appreciated none of the disrespect I had gotten lately from either of them. I also pointed out that I knew full well that a contract IT company would cost them at least hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for a consult, and at least $200 an hour, and if I deigned to fix our problem, it would take about 3 hours. Owner offered me a 50-cent raise and 3 hours overtime. I countered with a public apology in front of all staff from boss and a $3 an hour raise, and an exemption from the no-carrying firearms policy he was being hypocritical about. They said no, so I said I'll be in the back with the clients doing my job duties, and let me know when they had contacted an IT company and changed their minds. Keep in mind that all the computer systems were effectively bricked at this point, so the nurses can't do any charting. No one can bill time for casework. The state paperwork, while largely paper, can't be sent. It took them 4 days and who knows how many calls to computer specialists for quotes, and another 8 quitting employees to agree to my conditions. And after 4 tries to get me to let go of the concealed carry one, That was their sticking point. I don't carry a gun at work and never have, even though in my state it's totally legal. But it bugged me, the absolute hypocrisy of the owner. So I would have given up the raise before that. In the end, it turns out the owner's wife deleted something she shouldn't have had access to, and it took all of 8 minutes to restore them from backups I personally had on an old hard drive I wasn't using that the company said were an unnecessary cost. 2. At my previous job, I worked as a peer trainer. Essentially, I was required to do my assigned job to its full capacity, while also teaching everything to the newbies straight off the street. Not only did I agree to do this, I had volunteered for it. So this isn't a story about overwork. I worked in a large room where there were 5 stations of machines all lined up in a row, from one wall to the other. All stations to do the exact same thing, just with their own bugs and hiccups. One wall wasn't even a wall, but a giant window that looked into the break room. I have major anxiety about being snuck upon or watched without my knowing, enough to cause sudden anxiety attacks that can last for hours, or until I can remove myself from the room or building and sleep it off. I hate it, it's super inconvenient. Thankfully, this isn't an issue for the most part, because since I know the triggers, I can avoid them, or set up precautions, like sitting with my back to a wall, and my coworkers are usually understanding and don't sneak up on me. This window also proves to be a distraction for the trainees because they will try to look for and interact with their friends who are in the break room. I get that the job I was training them for was boring as heck, 12 hours long, and on the night shift, but we were working on large machines that needed to be watched at all times, in case they jammed or broke, which was often. Thankfully, my station was the third one away from the window, so I could easily keep everything maintained. The problem was, as it always seems to be in these stories, when a new supervisor moved to our area of the building. He was put in charge of Station 1 and 2. I'm assigned to Station 3. And technically speaking, Training 1 was supposed to be the training station. I had previously made a verbal agreement with his predecessor and the training team that I could stay on number 3 because of the previous points. Without asking or even giving me a heads up, I came back from work on a vacation day to find that I had already been reassigned to Section 1. Despite the protests of my coworkers in my absence. Not to be that person, but there was a reason the training team was so willing to bend the rules for me. I was really good at my job. I was the go-to person to ask when something broke, and even maintenance couldn't fix it. I've been told by my own leads that they refused to let me be transferred off their team without my insistence. So, a sudden and unprompted transfer like this was commonly considered extremely rude and was usually used as a punishment. I figured that as I had never met this new super before, I would just go talk to him and strike up the same deal as I had with all his predecessors for 4 years. I even had the lead for Station 1 come with me to confirm my case and act as a witness. She knew me well as an operator because I'd come over to help her fix her machines all the time. I quickly realized that he was not going to budge on the transfer, so I told him calmly that I was ready to quit being a trainer that day, and to have the extra pay cut off immediately. It's not like I was going to lose my job, and the trainer pay was less than $1 more an hour. I was doing this because I wanted to, not because I needed it. He was shocked. We eventually agreed that I'd finish training my current trainee in the area, while he looked for someone else, and until my request to quit training made its way to payroll. Cool. Apparently not cool. He came back 3 days later saying, with no proof or paper, claiming that HR said I had no choice. This bothered me for a few reasons. First, he did not call me into a meeting for this. He, despite my many warnings to him about my anxiety triggers, snuck up behind me with a group of supervisors to deliver the order. Second, none of the supervisors with him were actually ones in charge of me in any capacity. My lead, direct supervisor, or any of the training team that I was under were not there. I want to make this clear, this man was not my boss in any way. He was assigned to the training section. Yes, he had no authority over the trainers as trainers. So if a trainer was operating on a different section, he had no authority. The third thing that bothered me was that instead of looking for a new person like he promised, he took the time to find a way to force me to do what he wanted. As soon as he and his group appeared out of nowhere to quite literally surround me and block me in, I could already feel that stupid fight or flight kick in. I could barely keep my brain together enough to actually register what they were telling me. I would only agree in hopes that it would get them to leave sooner, hoping that I might be able to calm myself down and get in control again. I really hate causing a scene. When they left, I went to break before I moved to Section 1. Finally, this is where the malicious compliance comes in. Despite my best efforts, I could not calm myself over break. So when I went back and moved to sit beside the giant window, the added anxiety of that hit me pretty hard, just like I had warned. So I decided that since this came with a full and repeated warning from my end, I wasn't going to do anything to mask the anxiety attack this time. I don't have them often, and usually do my best to minimize the burden they cause to the people around me. This results in a few silent tears and lots of fidgeting, and a bit of pacing. This time, however, I just let it happen. We're talking rapid, frantic pacing, red-faced and tears streaming down my cheeks, strained breathing and digging my nails into my arms and hands. My poor trainee had no idea what was going on, and I was unable to teach her anything because I will go non-verbal when my anxiety acts up, which means I am completely useless as a trainer. When my coworker got back from his break, a prior trainee of mine with an old sweatshirt, he covered me so I could go home. After a few calls and texts to my leads and coworkers, I used up some PTO and didn't come back until I was no longer officially a trainer and could transfer back to my area. That supervisor was fired a few weeks later due to multiple complaints, on top of being caught in the act of screwing a coworker inside the building. She got fired too, much to the joy of everyone else. She was a Karen and a suck-up, and yelled at two of my very young and nervous trainees for following orders she didn't understand. Honestly, they're a match made in hell, and I hope they ended up happily together, so no one else would have to suffer their attention. 3. I've been teaching for 6 years. At my last school for 2 years. I have a BA in history and an MA in education. My principal and administrative staff pulled me out of one of my classes during an intense lecture I was giving, and ambushed me in the hallway to tell me, I was going to teach IB classes next year. For those unaware, international baccalaureate courses are intense classes for high school students that last from 1 to 2 years. These classes are intense, requiring what some teachers have said to be the time equivalent of a part-time job for them to plan and prepare, without additional pay and not part of my contract. For context, within the first 2 weeks of working at this school, I noticed the other side of the pendulum. The students with learning challenges were being pushed aside in order to achieve the principal's goals of becoming an elite IB school. I began advocating for these students and offered to teach co-taught classes with a special education teacher in order to help these students achieve. It was a great success, seeing many of the former troubled students actively being engaged in class, and through the grapevine, I was told I was one of their favorite teachers since I got them. After the first semester, I heavily petitioned the staff to allow me to teach more of these specialized classes across my department. Here's the deal, there was no change in the curriculum, just in how I presented it to the shared class. Anyhow, the principal shot down my idea, but allowed me to continue with my lone class for the next year. Back to present. After the ambush, I went home and talked it over with my wife. She is my rock, and understood that I was troubled with the additional task of basically adding an additional 15 hours of work a week to my schedule. She said, "Go with your heart." The next week, I scheduled a meeting with the principal. I told him I was unprepared to teach the IB course this year, but if he would give me the year to prepare the additional materials and create a curriculum, I would be good to go for the next. I also asked if there were any other additional classes he would like for me to put together to teach next year. He said, "No, teach this course next year or look for another job." I asked about additional co-taught courses for the shared students who were overlooked. He said they were not important. I reminded him yet again, I was currently working toward my PhD in history, in order to teach college-level courses in high school, so students could get dual credit and jump on college and tech schools. He laughed at me and said, and I quote, "None of the additional education you've taken since you started working here benefits the school at all. No one cares." This took the wind out of me. I love teaching. All of the additional work, time, and effort spent away from my family has been in order to be a better teacher, a better example for my students. I told him I would need to think about this, and quietly left the room. I took the next day off, spending time with my family and speaking with my therapist. I'm very lucky to have a wonderful support system. I went back to work after that, and there were a number of staff that spoke to me privately. They agreed what he said was shameful. They shared that I was not the only teacher he spoke to this way, from changing failing grades to passing to having teachers sponsor multiple extracurricular clubs without pay. I went to my union rep and added my statement to his ever-growing pile of staff statements about the principal. I assured him I was willing to go to the school board, etc. Just give me a call. Yep, I decided I was done. I wrote the principal an outstanding resignation letter full of positivity and thanking him for the wonderful opportunity to work at his school and to have learned from his outstanding example of leadership. Did I also mention I forwarded the email to the entire staff? There was no way he could publicly respond negatively to my resignation, and he was furious. The majority of the staff knew what was going on. There were many smiles and fist bumps. I was told by the office staff later there were 5 other teachers that resigned, making this the biggest turnover in staff in a decade. The principal now has to go before the school board next month to explain what is happening at his school. I wonder if I'm going to get a call. Hellfreezer's note, I really hope you do get that call and have the chance to air your grievances thoroughly and honestly. I've been hearing stories lately of good teachers, people like yourself that enjoy teaching, who've just quit because it's not worth it oftentimes for them, and they've moved on to other things because, much as they love teaching, it's just not paying the bills, and the complete lack of respect isn't making it worth it. I think for a lot of them, if there was more respect and appreciation, they might tough it out a bit longer. Sadly, teachers are one of the most underappreciated jobs in our society. Nobody appreciates them while they're there, but they sure as hell miss them when they're gone. I mean, when the bureaucrats get involved, pen pushers, the people who don't actually do the teaching work, I don't remember anybody ever complaining about a lack of bureaucrats. Funny that. 4. I used to work at this factory. I was a housekeeper for about a year, then I transferred to the hose department. I had made hoses for the machines. Now, there was the main girl that was a team lead, and she was known for being a bad person. I wouldn't have transferred, but I was in an abusive relationship and was trying to save money to move. My biggest dislike of this lady was that she was very sexually driven. I'm all for expressing yourself, but she would flirt and hook up with all the guys on the line, and she had a huge hang-up on the big boss. She hated that the big boss was taking a liking to me. By this, I mean when he asked me to do something, I did it. There was this big deal about how the hose department was behind because they couldn't keep workers, and I was fast, even with my rib being out. She did this thing that took her an extra 10 to 15 minutes per set, which Big Boss told her to stop doing. She trained me to do it her way, but I found it easier to do it Big Boss's way and faster. Big Boss encouraged me because our production increased since I was there, and I did what he said. Plus, I wasn't flirting with the line 50% of the day. She instantly changed towards me, very short and rude, and pointing out every mistake. This lady constantly told me that her department starts off at $17, and the job posting also said $17. So when I got 16, I was upset. I talked to the boss about it and said 16 is what the department starts at, and to be happy I'm making more than I was before. Also talked to past hose girls and they said they got $16.50. After this, I was angry the rest of the day. Also, my move-out date was getting closer, and that was also stressing me out. She was talking to me about how unfair it was that I wasn't getting paid the right amount, and I said something about how Big Boss was a piece of crap and shouldn't even have his job. A lot more bad going on, but too much to write. This angered her a lot. I leave because I have a doctor's appointment, and Boss called me while there and texted me to come straight to the office when I get back. My boss's boss was there when I walked in. They accused me of putting a knife to someone's neck and threatening them. I was shocked. Obviously, I denied it because I did no such thing. Then it was, well, you put a knife to someone's neck, then you had a knife and pointed it at them, then you had a knife and were upset. I was like, who? I was with Lady all day. Did you ask her? Then they said she was the one I did it to, and there were multiple witnesses. Long story short, they fire me. Later found out one of the witnesses is this lady's close self-proclaimed father figure. That night my ex was extremely angry at me for losing my job, and then I get served domestic abuse papers by a cop regarding the work stuff. First off, it says right on the paper, this excludes co-workers. I go to court for it, and she doesn't even show up. I move away, and I did contact a lawyer about everything, but he said if there are witnesses, even if they aren't real, that could end up having the whole thing turned against me. Now for the revenge. On my last day of work at a nursing home, I see Lady. She is talking to the hiring manager. She leaves, and I instantly go in and ask if that was her, and get told yes. I explain how she got multiple people fired at her old job and loves to start and stir drama. Hiring manager says she will note that. Lady didn't get the job. 5. Many years ago, I worked in aged care as a personal care assistant. The lowest rung of nursing staff, basically responsible for all the physical labor, such as showering residents, assisting them to go to the toilet, getting them in and out of bed, that sort of thing. I loved my job, I genuinely did. And for a while I worked at an agency going from place to place, before getting poached by a specific nursing home, which is where the malicious compliance takes place. I'd been working there for about a month, doing 4 days a week, all afternoons, 3 to 10 p.m. And 2 of those afternoons were back-to-back Wednesday and Thursday. And this is where the other nurse comes into play. Every second Wednesday, without fail, she would call in about 20 minutes before her shift. The 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. overnight shift was due to begin, leaving no time to get agency staff in to take over. Now, I could wait until they arrived, but by the time they got there, it would likely be after 12 and my trains home would not be running. So in the end, I took a double shift, 3 p.m. to 7 a.m., leaving me tired mentally and physically trying to get home on a packed morning rush hour train. So not much fun, but given the other option was to leave my residence without proper care, and that would never, ever happen, this meant that by the time I got home it was around 9:30 a.m., and couldn't get immediately to sleep due to needing to eat, shower, and do the plethora of tasks needed to be done before going to bed for the day. Meaning I wasn't able to get to sleep until around 12:30, and my train to work left at 1. This was obviously untenable. And after trying to do a double, followed by a regular shift sans sleep a few times, I realized I was becoming a danger to my residents, my fellow staff members, and myself, due to not being able to maintain concentration. In the end, I told my RN that on the Thursdays after a double I would not be able to do my shift for fear of someone getting hurt, which would open the nursing home and myself to potential legal trouble, not to mention someone suffering because of my choices. So this had been happening for about 6 months now when I get called up to the office of the owner, who promptly sat me down and berated me for taking every second Thursday off and not being a team player. I tried to explain why it was that I was taking those Thursdays off, but she would not listen, so in the end, I walked out with a write-up and a threat of termination if this behavior continued. Fast forward to the next Wednesday when, as usual, the other nurse called in 20 minutes before shift start, saying she couldn't make it, leaving us a nurse down for the night, so the only person on for that entire shift would be a registered nurse. And you can't lift or assist people with only one person without using a hoist. And even then, you are meant to have 2 people for safety reasons. The nurse in charge of afternoons rolled her eyes after the call and said, "Looks like you're doing another double-bearded guy." To which I replied, "I can't. And since staying until agency staff get here is not an option, since I wouldn't be able to get home, I suggest you call the owner and see what she recommends. And if she needs me to stay, I will, but only if she gives me the direction herself, and then confirms it with you." After 10 minutes, the owner hadn't answered any attempts to call, and I said, "Sorry, I have to leave," and the RN for the night shift began to get angry, to which I responded, "I will get fired if I stay here, and then need to take tomorrow off, or someone could get harmed if I stay and then work. Neither of these is a great outcome, so I have to go." Now, I knew they were never going to be able to get agency staff with such short notice, and that even by the slimmest of chances they could find someone, it would be several hours between registering the request and someone showing up. So I walked out the door and hung around the corner for half an hour, knowing I would get a call sooner rather than later, and that I needed to be close by in order to get back and ensure my residents got the care they needed overnight, and had my idiot grin to wake up to in the morning, especially for the 3 people who loved early morning showers. The call came, I returned, and 2 nights later I got a call from the owner, who authorized me to work doubles as needed, and take the next day off for safety reasons. As far as I know, the nurse who did the late call-ins was still working there when I left a year later. In the end, my residents got the care they deserved, and I got to get some sleep after working 15 hours straight. Hellfreezer's note, I'm very glad to hear you're not working there anymore, because while you were certainly putting the care of your patients first, you were being manipulated and emotionally abused by those you work for. But you're free of that now, and I certainly hope you're in a much better place who treat you with the respect you deserve. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 361. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and share the video with friends and family. And if you want early access, then support me on my Patreon page for as little as $1 a month, or more if you like. By doing so, you get all the videos all at once on a Monday. There's also links in the description to the Hellfreezer Discord, as well as a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store on Teespring, where you can get your hoodies, your t-shirts, and your mugs. And if you really enjoyed today's video, why not leave a tip? Do that by clicking on the heart with a $sign underneath the video player. No need for any of that though, although I very much appreciate it and it really does help. Okay, no more bits and bobs today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, and this one comes from Newcomb via the Discord. Do your dreams mostly take place in places you've been in real life or made-up locations? For me, I think it's 50-50, although I don't really remember my dreams too clearly. But from what I recall, sometimes, yes, it will... That whole thing where, something not nice might be happening, and you wake up and, oh, okay, it was just a dream, thank goodness. And then there's the fun kind of fantasy ones. I wish I could remember them more clearly, though. But that's me. Let me know what you think in a comment below. There are no wrong answers, and I look forward to seeing yours. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And this comes from Revenge is Ice Cream 359, and I believe it was in relation to your favorite kind of pudding. And today's answer comes from Avery Santos. Arroz con leche Mexican-style rice pudding, with that perfect bit of cinnamon dusting on top. Or banana pudding with whipped cream and Nilla wafers. My mother would make this for us, and her mom made it for her. But of the originals, I'd probably choose chocolate more often than tapioca, and never vanilla. Thank you very much for your answer, Avery Santos. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.